Francine looks like a hurricane out there based on the new advisory. Thank you, David Schwartz, for putting the coordinates on the chat board. And we'll talk about that right from the get go and then move into our own weather issues, which are hardly any. And we'll talk about where we're going as far as the weekend and next week. So that's all tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And if you'd like to lend some support to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, you could do it by shopping the referral link at the top of the chat board on Amazon. So you go to Amazon, buy that link, search for your stuff, buy it. Amazon throws us back a little bit of coin, doesn't come out of your pocket, and everybody's happy. So we appreciate your support by shopping our referral link at Amazon. So there you are, Mr. Rayo. It took a little while, but it looks like Francine. I was just looking at the Recon uh, down. They're going to report. They got 982 for the new advisory, 982 millibars. That kind of looked like it was closer to 980 on the graph, but looks like it's finally starting to strengthen a bit, and they've extended hurricane warnings and watches further east across southern Louisiana. Nothing changes as far as we're concerned because none of that's coming here in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, this is the weekend of Mrs. Rayo's big German Fest or Oktoberfest that she helps to put on for the local German club. And she's been asking over the last day or two, does it look like any part of the storm will affect the Northeast or the tri-state area? And from what I could see, Joe, the clouds are going to work their way all the way up to maybe as far north as Baltimore and Washington, mid and high level clouds, but then high pressure over the weekend is going to kind of flex its muscles and kind of push all of that activity back south. And it looks like it's going to stay dry and sunny up here in the Northeast right on through the rest of the week and on into the upcoming weekend. And we've got about 12 to maybe 18 more hours of that system to stay out over the warm waters of the Gulf before it finally makes landfall. So don't be surprised if from a Cat 1, they may actually bump it up to a Cat 2 or at the very least a very strong Cat 1 because those waters are very warm. Storm systems like this like to tap into very warm waters such as the Gulf. And at this time of the year, the peak of the hurricane season. So we'll see how that storm system, um, whether or not it continues to intensify and maybe gets bumped up to a 2 before making landfall tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the. I'll bring up the hazards map here. Let's take a look because we actually have it where the center is in between two buoys at the moment. And I've also overlaid the radar here, and there's a buoy. The buoy to the east. There's a southeast wind at the West Gulf uh, buoy 207 miles east of Brownsville, southeast at 29, gusting to 36 with a temperature of 83. And then on the other side, there's a north northeast wind at the Alaminos uh, Alaminos Sea Oil Rig, and they are north northeast at 21, gusting to 41 with heavy rain. So in between those two buoys, somewhere in there is where the center is. Just looking at the two wind barbs the way they are, so it's probably just east. If you draw a line from Brownsville straight east, where the wind at Brownsville is actually northwest at a temperature of 84, northwest gusting to 24. Nothing much going on along the Texas coast as far as winds are concerned. I mean, there's some gusts up to 20, big deal. The buoy wind gusts, other than the ones that are kind of close, aren't really doing very much. There's one, Eugene Island, which is south of the southwest part of Louisiana. They're northeast at 32, gusting to 39. Ship Shoal 241 To the east of that is east northeast at 35. I'm sorry, 28, gusting to 35. And the Southwest Pass uh, maritime observation station is at east northeast at 25, gusting to 26. Okay, I guess so. But you can see also I've overlaid the radar echoes, and we do have rain that has moved up into southeast Louisiana, and also along the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and Alabama, and even some rain up to the Florida Panhandle. What kind of happened last night, Joe, was the fact that drier air got entrained. The northern part of the convection just sort of separated itself and advanced to the northeast. And if you look on the loop, it almost looks like a separate plume that is running up to Alabama, Mississippi, and Alabama, and into Georgia. The high clouds are actually just about to me here, believe it or not, from that first plume. And then you have the uh, area of convection and where the circulation center is, which is almost like a separate entity. And that definitely does look like, at least from during this afternoon and into this evening, that it's gotten better organized.
And indeed, the excuse me. Um, I noticed on the satellite pictures late last night, it almost looked like the storm had split apart because you could see the two areas of convection that you just made reference to. But it is actually just one singular system with one singular that will eventually become one main system that will make its landfall tomorrow somewhere along the Louisiana coast. And it'll be a very potent storm, Joe. We're talking about not necessarily in terms of wind, but I think even more so, the thing to be fearful for is the rain, which could be 5 to 10 or 6 to 12 inches in a very short interval of time, which could lead to very, very significant flooding concerns for those who are especially located near the coast, where there could be a storm surge as well. So this is not going to be a very pretty picture, unfortunately, once again, for the folks who live along the coastline, the Gulf coastline of Louisiana, especially.
Okay, let me just skimming through the chat board here right now. Welcome tonight to everybody on the chat board. Those of you who are not on the chat board but watching in the background, welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast as we take a look at Hurricane Francine. Thank you for being here. We're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Now tomorrow night we'll have a late start, so probably not starting till at least 8:30, possibly as late as 8:45. I'm going to schedule the show for 8:30 p.m. And I won't be able to change the time if it winds up being closer to 8:45. So if we're not on by 8:32, 1:32, figure out that the start time's probably been pushed back closer to 8:45. But I'm trying to be here for 8:30. So make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on, and if you like the show, by all means, hit the like button. So here is the forecast, the Hurricane Center's forecast with this at 7 p.m. The Hurricane Francine, top wind 75 miles an hour, 25.8 north, 94.8 west. To pull up the advisory on the other computer screen that I have. So this way we can get the distance here. Um, so the reference points are 150 miles east of the mouth of the Rio Grande and 350 miles southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana, moving northeast or 0350 degrees at 10 miles an hour. That's about the fastest movement we've seen out of this uh, at any time during its lifespan. And they're carrying a pressure of 982 millibars, which is 29 inches even. And the track has been shifted a little bit further to the east. So they put the rest of southeast Louisiana, which was just under a tropical storm warning and still is. They've also added a hurricane watch in case it, nudges a little bit further to the east. And also the warning has been nudged further east to Homa, Louisiana, and that's in the red area. So the blue is tropical storm warnings. They've also been extended to the Alabama and the Mississippi and Alabama Gulf Coast. And you can see the forecast track just sort of northeast, comes inland sometime later tomorrow afternoon, and then starts to turn a little more northward as it weakens into a tropical depression. And they have it up by Saturday afternoon. They have the remnant low in southern Illinois. It may just completely fall apart there. This is, again, to emphasize that this is not going to be one of these deals that turns eastward and brings an area of heavy rain into uh, the northern Appalachians, and across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and into southern New England, because you got this big high and it's just blocking everything. It's just kind of suppressing everything. If anything, Joe, the moisture from this will probably hang around the Gulf states into the weekend. It'll just sort of spread out across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and maybe even into South Carolina.
It's going to be a long-term stretch of wet weather. And I mentioned specifically the Louisiana coast receiving 5 to 10 or 6 to 12 inches of rain, but there'll be not quite as heavy rainfall that is expected along coastal areas of Mississippi, Alabama, as far to the east as parts of the Florida Panhandle. So, and of course, you mentioned the slow movement, Joe. And again, all of this moisture is just going to, when it reaches the coast, it's just going to hit the coast, and through frictional drag, as the thing gradually moves northward, will just spread out to the west and to the east of the landfall point. And yeah, it is just going to be very wet along much of the Gulf Coast between tomorrow on into the start of the upcoming weekend.
So on the graph recon observations, it looks like the peak wind at flight level anyway was up at about 75 knots. And the red, which is the pressure, there's a gap in here, but you can see where it bottoms out and it just kind of touches 980 millibars. And that was at 7:22 p.m. that it made that bottom. And that was from the first pass. So we'll see what they do with this going forward. This is what it looks like graphically, and they've got a 983. Sometimes what they show on the graph, and then they do a little mathematics adjusted for sea level or any other impacts to get a number. So they may have gotten 980 on there, and then they just nudged it up to 982. And on the actual visual that Levi Cowan provides on Tropical Tidbits. On the first pass, 983 millibars. On the wind barbs on the northeast side, you can see all these purples. That's 64 to 83 knots in those purple wind barbs. So this is a hurricane. It is what? Is that the third one? Right? Beryl,
Uh,
Debbie,
yeah,
and and this one. This is
right.
also, I think, the third storm that's come out of the southwest Gulf of Mexico this season.
Right. It's kind of strange at this time of the year. You'd anticipate hurricanes or major tropical cyclones to be emanating from off of the African coast and taking that long trek westward across the Atlantic, but we have not yet seen anything remotely like that. In fact, the two other systems that National Hurricane Center has their eyes on is more or less like in the Central Atlantic. So it's kind of an atypical, and of course we've already remarked about how the number of storms has been lower than what we would anticipate at this particular point in time. So it's been one of those atypical years for tropical systems in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and the Atlantic and the Caribbean basins.
The intensity guidance is pretty much in agreement. The vast majority, obviously, the ones that don't make it a hurricane are already wrong. The ones that have made it a hurricane have it peaking in intensity in about 24 hours or so, so near landfall. As a Cat 1, some of them a strong Cat 1. None of them have it up as a Cat 2. And there is a shear zone that runs right along the immediate Gulf Coast. So once it gets into that, it probably will be hard pressed for it to gain any additional strength. It's got its window of strengthening now into tomorrow morning, and then after that, it'll probably stop. So we'll see where it winds up. Still some time for it to strengthen some more. We've seen just in the last number of hours, a rather large pressure drop. So we'll have to see if that continues as we move into the overnight hours. And there's not really much disagreement with regards to the model track guidance. All of the models are fairly clustered together. They've been shifting to the east all the last couple of days, and come in southeast Louisiana, west of New Orleans. All the tracks, but for one or two, but actually one that the furthest east one comes right over New Orleans. The furthest west one is probably closer to Lafayette, and those then even stay fairly clustered up through Mississippi. It's funny, Joe. You don't see storms that crack close to the Mississippi River, but this one's going to probably do a pretty good job of trying to track northward up the Mississippi River basin.
And once again, as I mentioned just earlier on in the show, all of what you're seeing here across the southern tier of the United States pretty much is going to stay out of the picture for us. In fact, Joe, I just took a look at the Climate Prediction Center's 6 to 10 and 8 to 14-day outlook. And for our part of the country, for up here in the Northeast, they've got it below normal precipitation wise all the way out till about the 24th of September. So we're in for a long stretch of dry conditions. I've not yet seen the 7-day quantitative precipitation map from WPC. I'm sure you'll be showing that in just a moment, but I'm sure that we're in the white zone and will be in the white zone or no precipitation zone for quite a few days to come.
Well, since you brought it up, yes, indeed. So this takes us to next Wednesday, the 18th. They've got a few little green spots there in the Catskills and in the upper Hudson Valley, and another little light green spot in eastern Pennsylvania. That represents less than from 1/100th to a tenth of an inch. Big whoopee. But yeah, from Maine down into northern Virginia and West Virginia, eastern Ohio, not a drop of rain is forecast over the next 7. You have to really get down into close to the South Carolina, North Carolina state line, and in eastern North Carolina, where you're seeing an indication of maybe a half to 3/4, and that's probably more related to the onshore flow when we get into next week, and not so much with what's going on now. In fact, you'll notice that there's a kind of a max amount there in western South Carolina, western North Carolina, and northeast Georgia. Then it goes down a little bit, and then you've got the more area that's really because of Francine, and that is. I'm going to see if I get to go to the Hurricane Center's WPC's map on the Hurricane Center so we can see a close up of this. And you can see the rainfall amounts. They've actually increased this a bit. They've got the yellow is 4 to 6 inches. That goes all the way up into western Tennessee. The light brown is 6 to 8, where we have a little dot there northeast of Jackson, Mississippi, and then, of course, into southeast Louisiana. And then it picks up to the 8 to 12 as you get closer to the coastline, right in the middle part of the state. And then they've got this heavy area of 12 to 16 that's offshore. And they also have rainfall amounts of 4 to 6 inches in parts of southern Alabama near Mobile, east of the Florida Panhandle, almost but not quite to Tallahassee. Tallahassee's in the 2 to 4 inch zone. And then a separate 2 to 4 inch zone that's very close to me, which I'm kind of happy about. And a little 4 to 6 inch yellow spots there in western North Carolina. So the fact that this is moving is good because it keeps things from getting too extreme. And the rainfall in a lot of the areas, particularly as you go further inland and go east, is going to be spread out over several days. So that's a plus instead of having it come all at once. So this might play out in a way that is I don't know how to put it. I guess minimally inconvenient. I don't know if well, it's going to be inconvenient, but maybe it won't be destructive from the standpoint of rainfall. We'll just have to see how it plays out. And then they've got WPC's got moderate risk for flash flooding, close to where the landfall is into southern Mississippi, and then they have the slight risk, which is 15 to 40% pushing up into southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri, western Kentucky, and western Tennessee, also into western Alabama down to the Florida Panhandle. So, yeah, is this going to produce 20 to 30-inch rain amounts? Well, it shouldn't. So let's just hope it doesn't. But the way it looks right now, yeah, it's going to be problem and it's going to cause some issues. But with a little luck, it won't cause big issues.
And on the chat board, Frank R. Bringing up the fact that tomorrow, as we know, is the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and the weather tomorrow morning, will be very much like it was on that fatal day back in 2001. Deep blue skies, low humidity, very pleasantly cool temperatures in the morning, and that pretty much was what we all had on that particular morning. And I remember very well that we had a cold front move on through the night before. The day before 9/11 in 2001, it was a very muggy, humid, sticky day with temperatures up in the 80s. And then with the front that evening, we had some rather significant thunderstorm activity. It didn't last very long in New York City. I think they picked up like a half an inch in only about an hour's time. But once that front moved offshore, big, beautiful, dry, high pressure cell built in, and that set the stage for the weather for the following day, which again was a beautiful day, and it was beautiful up until about 8:45 a.m. And then everything went everything went haywire. We all remember that. Those of us who were around 23 years ago, we will never forget. And every time the weather ends up very nice, very beautiful, as it will be tomorrow, it only drives home the memory even more.
U.S. Satellite loop tonight. It's clear from Maine down into South Carolina. The high clouds actually starting to come in now in northern areas of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and into South Carolina. And of course, you can see it in the Southwest Gulf, Francine being there. It's all kind of connected. If you just look at what's from Newfoundland, south across to the south through the Atlantic down to about Bermuda, and then going west from there. This is one long boundary here, Joe. The old frontal boundary out offshore, and then it goes back through the Gulf states and into the Southwest Gulf, where on the bottom of it you have Francine. So I mean, ultimately, there was an old frontal trough here that was the start of all of this, with a little tropical disturbance that got into the Southwest Gulf and interacted with that trough, and now the trough is gone because the whole thing, just became a tropical system. Atmosphere warmed up, and but it's very interesting how it's all connected the way it is. A little system there in the Western Lakes with some clouds and a couple of rumbles of thunder. You can see a few lightning flashes there. Also, some scattered storms in parts of the Rockies and back over into the Wasatch Range and into parts of Nevada. And the Storm Prediction Center, it's mostly general thunderstorms. They've got a marginal risk along the south coast of Louisiana tonight. And then tomorrow, they have a marginal to slight risk. Southeast Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle, the marginal risk pushes a little bit further north into Mississippi at a 2 to 5% tornado risk. And I think there probably will be some spin ups here. I mean, this has all the characteristics of a system that's going to probably produce a few tornadoes in all of this. And then as we go on to day three, the marginal risk shifts a little bit eastward, eastern Mississippi, much of Alabama except the Northeast, and then the Florida Panhandle, all again under a marginal risk for severe weather, and that would be Thursday into Friday. Uh, there's nothing new from this, Joe. This is one of these this long stretch. Every day I kind of been looking at everything and thinking, okay, am I going to see something a little different? And the answer to that is no, an unequivocal no. Just looking at the upper air, we've got this upper trough that's pulling out now in New England and in Atlantic Canada. The ridge is going to start building from Virginia, North Carolina, northwestward into the Great Lakes to eventually close off an upper high there by the time we get to Thursday night, and that effectively traps the system that is Francine. That is going to pretty much trap it down here. You can see the upper low center on the GFS. This is for Thursday night in northwest Mississippi. And here's your upper high. I'm going to just kind of draw it there and put the big H there. It's basically acting as a brick wall, and it can't go northward. It just can't. So the upper low weakens and opens up and just slides underneath that upper high, which shifts into New York State and Pennsylvania over the weekend. And then what's left of the energy from Francine in the upper air anyway is from northern Alabama and Tennessee eastward to off the southeast coast. So this area in here is probably going to have showery rains into and probably through the weekend because of the structure of the upper air. But meanwhile, here in the Northeast, we've got a big upper high sitting overhead. The westerlies are way to the north, trough in the west. I mean, it's a bit of a bizarre setup.
It's now is this is it, I was going to say, is this what they call a Rex block? Or it looks more like an well, I don't know if
Oh,
no, it's a mega
hold on.
block.
Well, let's look. Here's on the wider look.
The Rex block is when you have kind of a low pressure system underneath the ridge, and
Yeah, it's not. Well, I mean, technically, there is an upper low that's underneath that upper high.
right.
So I suppose we could call it that. Well, it's our show. You can call it whatever you want. Anyway, um, eventually the upper high does weaken, but it's not until the middle of next week. There's a remnant upper low that's in the southeast that gets lifted northward. Now, how real that is, I don't know. That's the big question about whether any kind of rain uh, sneaks northward during, say, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. It'll depend on whether the structure of this upper low, if it does wind up staying down there and remains intact, that maybe it gets to lift up northward and bring some showery rains during the middle part of next week. But you know what? At this early stage, it's a stretch. And the closed upper high reforms in southeast Canada and over New England by the end of next week. So, aside from that, if that's not real, then yeah, it's going to be dry for a long stretch of time.
Yes, and I think I mentioned yesterday that from like 15 days out, since the beginning of the month, the some of the models have been alluding to some kind of a system coming up along the Atlantic seaboard around the 17th or 18th, even at one point looking kind of like a hurricane. But so far out, you really can't put too much credence on it. They're still trying to make something of it, but again, I don't really know whether or not it's going to happen. And I think with that big high, it's not likely that we're going to see any significant wetness around here for again quite some time.
Right. So again, if the models, if that upper feature remains intact, that's what the GFS is doing. It actually reforms it. Um, and this would be Francine again, I guess, because you could track the system all the way along, both at the surface and loft. But it does form a low off the Carolina coast, and then brings it northwestward into North Carolina, and then you start to see the rain coming up. But then we're talking Wednesday. We're talking Wednesday and Thursday of next week. So until then, it's 8 days from now. So there's 8 days of no rain until there's even the first chance that there could be something. And I would just say that given the circumstances, you have to look at it look at it as a long shot. And of course, as we go beyond that, eventually it does get cool at the very end. There's a front that comes through and a big high from Canada in the 1030s, Joe. By the time we get to 384 hours, it's a high that in the wintertime you'd be jumping up and down with.
Yeah,
And of
jumping up and down to try to get your circulation going and to stay warm.
Yeah, in the Atlantic, just kind of looking here, because there's me see what they did with the. Let's just bring up the outlook. Let's go to the 7 day. So they have the system that is just to the west of the Cabo Verde Islands. They now have a 40% chance in the next 48 hours and an 80% chance that this could develop in the next 7 days. The one that's ahead of it now, they've reduced to 30 and 30 because nothing's happened yet. And probably the system that's to the east of that appears to be a bit more dominant. And running it on the GFS, we see it does try to form something at the end of the week, but it's way out in the Atlantic. It barely gets to 40 west and it's already moving northward. There's some kind of low that forms east of Bermuda late this week that gets all wound up into a fairly, it's down to like low 980s in the middle of the Atlantic, around 40 degrees north. That might be a system that gets designated a tropical system and then gets where a name you get a name out of the way. But again, I'm not really seeing much of anything on the last couple of runs with regards to something coming out in the tropical Atlantic. At the very end, there's a tropical storm in the central tropical Atlantic, and there's a new tropical storm that comes out of the Northwest Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico. It does seem that that's where they want to form this year. So maybe this will be another one. Maybe the next one that of importance is going to be something that comes out of either the Northwest Caribbean or another one that comes out of the Southwest Gulf.
Well, that seems to be, as I said earlier, the pattern for this particular year. Normally, again, at this point in September, we start looking toward the African coast for waves coming in off of the west coast of Africa and progressing across the Atlantic Ocean. We're not seeing that pattern this year. We're seeing them more in the mid-Atlantic or central Atlantic as opposed to way out toward the African coast. But again, we're at the midpoint now. This traditionally is the midpoint of the hurricane season. So now it's the downturn, but it's going to be a slow downturn between now and the middle part of October. A lot of stuff can happen, and we'll keep an eye on it. And of course, if anything does happen, we'll let you know right here on our Joe and Joe show.
All right, so you have Briller Jeopardy tonight, so let's get it going.
We will, and I'm going to get it right now from Mr. Briller. And today on Briller Jeopardy, average lows, as we were last night, average lows in the month of September for the following places. So these are the average low temperatures for September, and we start with Las Vegas, Nevada, Joe.
Average low temperature?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I don't know. And for the month of October, you said, or September?
September. We're not in
September.
October.
No, I know. Um, I'll say 71.
Joe, I almost could ring the bell for you. You're in snake country with that 71.
That close, huh?
Mike Waterhouse is 71. Maggie P are a little warm with 74, as is the case with Patrick Darcy. A couple of people, William Huber, 85. That's much too warm.
Bella Lugrisi is at 70 and Vincent Croce is at 72. So it's one of those two.
Vincent Croce, we hit the big one. Ring the bell for you. There you go. Ding ding. 72. Average low in Las Vegas in September. Now we move to Miami.
In September in Miami. Oh, God. 74.
Not a bad guess, but not high enough or warm enough.
Well, Frank R says 77.
WABC. You're right. 77. Jason Fox, 77. Northern Grace, 77. Miami, 77 degrees. So why don't we try number 3? And here is a place that is not at, but close to ground zero for Francine tomorrow. New Orleans.
New Orleans in September. Hmm. I'll say I'll say 69.
Oh, Joe, too cool.
Too cool. Uh, Patrick Darcy says 74.
We have two winners, Jason Fox and Patrick Darcy, both with 74, and that is the average low in New Orleans in September, 74 degrees.
It is a swamp there.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Let's try to clean up the swamp by heading north to Central Park.
Uh, for the whole month of September.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll say, hold on. Let's see, 67. I'll say 63.
Joe, so close. Again, Snake Country.
Northern Grace at 64, and Jason Fox at 62.
And Jason Fox, congratulations. You hit it. 62 degrees for Central Park in September, the average low temperature. And the fifth city on our list tonight, Joe, is Steeler Country or Pirate Country, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. All right, so what did we say? What was New York against 63?
62.
62. Um, I'll say for Pittsburgh, I'll give it an even 60.
Not quite cool enough.
Okay, well, Mark Francine has 58. Vincent Croce has 58. How are those numbers?
Still a little bit on the warm side. I'll give you a hint.
Maggie
This
P's at 57.
this number got you in trouble at Pix 11 with your
Oh, double
colleague.
nickels?
Double nickels.
Double nickels.
Yes.
I knew
55.
55. Double nickels. Alan Rupa. The double
Yes.
nickels.
And Mike Waterhouse, too. And Tyler Fenga. Now, the bonus. Here's the bonus city for tonight, Cape Hatteras.
Oh, oh.
Ooh,
Uh, I'm going to say 71.
Joe, I don't know what it is about you tonight. You're right there. Almost.
Almost.
Almost. Rich Mansky also said 71.
And Frank Garr said 72. And William Uber said 72. Tyler Fenga says 70. And Patrick Darcy says 70.
Well, Patrick Darcy, and who was the other one who said 70?
Tyler Fenga.
Congratulations. You hit it. 70 degrees in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina.
And by the way, the double nickels thing, right? The double
Yeah.
nickels thing, I just want to go on record as saying the fact that they told me I couldn't do it anymore was probably right up there in a long list of stupidity. Okay. I mean, the idea that I couldn't say that, and that's what and that's what they came down with. And considering what they get away with now, I mean, and I know what was behind that decision, by the way. So that's another conversation that's off camera.
Okay. All right.
But the bottom line is, it was stupid to tell me that I couldn't do it. So anyway, you know what
I
it
have
is? I'm feeling an extra loose and extra free every day that goes by that I'm not working for, one of these corporate evil entities that, I'm starting to say things that you could attribute to it saying, oh, it's an old person. They don't care anymore. You know, and that's sort of how I feel at the moment because I've got nothing to lose.
I have to tell you that I stole that double nickels line. I used to use it when I was on News 12, and I remember when I was assigned to do a story about the weather forecasters at the Westchester. It was at some Westchester Golf Club, the some national tournament in June of 2004 was being held at the Westchester Country Club, and so I had to go down there. And I spoke with the gentleman who was responsible for alerting the golfers to impending bad weather. And while I was waiting, some a patrol car came rolling up to where I was, stopped, and the guy, the patrol guy, the cop, stuck his head out the window and said, "I love watching you on Channel 12 at night. Now, please say it for me." And I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "When the temperature is 55, please say it right now because I
Yeah.
love that." And I said, "Oh, you mean double nickels?" Ah ha ha! And he gave me a high five. This is a cop, Westchester patrol car or whatever. I mean, like, so
Well,
and no
it was all from, and I used them all. I mean, double sixes was box cars, you know,
cars.
right? 31 was a little Joe, three and a one. I mean, right off Abbott and Costello, by the way.
And I mean, we know it was a very popular line. So why did that individual, complain bitterly that he didn't like when you used it?
Well, it came down. I mean, of all the things to worry about, this was something that came down through management. Okay. Um, so, and I remember trying to explain it, and I got that sort of vacant. When somebody gives you that vacant look, like they have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
That's sort of what I got.
We might see that between the two candidates tonight in about an
Uh,
hour.
you mind? I'm not. Okay, I'm going to bed. I'm having a glass of wine and smoking a cigar, and I'm going to bed. I have no desire to watch that. But just going back. It's just on a long laundry list of crap that I put up with that I don't have to put up with it anymore and haven't for the last 5 years.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. And that's
Wonderful.
probably, by the way, that's probably why that one station that you used to work at is one of only two stations in the entire universe tonight that's not running that debate. And as I said
Yeah, it
last,
was, I don't get me wrong. I loved working with Pix. I worked with the greatest people there. They were wonderful. I've got so many great memories with the people I worked with. It was just, there was just a couple of folks, well, a couple of folks in upper management, and then one particular bag of gas that we all know and love. Um, you know, one day the circus will close and the carnival barker will have to retire, but I don't know when that is.
all right. Well, as a final public service tonight, to all of you who are leaving us to go and watch the debate, for those of you who are baseball fans, Yankees are losing 3-0 in the fifth, and the Mets are down 5-1 to Toronto in the top of the fourth. So there you
And on
go.
that happy note, we will see everybody. Remember, late start tomorrow. At the earliest, it'll be is 8:30. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.